YouTube, it's Friday, so here's my video for this week. The topic is trans people in the media. So yeah, I'll just go down the questions and do the best I can. How do I feel about the way the media and the entertainment industry portrays trans people? I don't really know that I have a really big opinion on that. I feel like lately the media and different channels and different entertainment industries, I suppose, have been trying to be a little more educational about trans issues. I've seen a lot of documentaries that are trying to be more, present more of just an educational perspective on it and less of a like, whoa, check this crazy thing out, and more of like, this is actually someone's reality. So I think that's good. Do you think that trans people are generally portrayed negatively or positively? I think there are usually two ways in which that they're portrayed. Either like as some sort of like freak type thing, like look at these crazy thing that's happening, these crazy people, which is clearly negative, or in an educational way. I don't know that it's necessarily positive so much as it is more of a like, this is what's going on, these are people's realities, and in a more respectful way of that, less demeaning. Kidding. And then next question, do you think these portrayals are based on facts and true information, or based solely on cliched or ignorant-based stereotypes? I think that, I don't know if it's a cliche or ignorance-based, but I think there's a meta-narrative that exists out there that like, I was born in the wrong body, and I've always hated my body, and I was very suicidal, and I was going to kill myself if I couldn't. You were out of control. I was going to kill myself if I didn't go through this process to change my gender. And I feel like a lot of the documentaries and news things that I've seen, or just stuff I've seen on TV, does really play into that meta-narrative. That's the story they present. They don't present people that are more, they don't fall out of that. They're maybe more genderqueer, or they don't present people that, they just don't think that way. Like Andrew wasn't ever suicidal, and he wasn't going to kill himself if he didn't have surgery. He just liked his body better this way, and he envisioned his body in a male way, and so he made the changes he needed to make in order to have that body. So I think that there is very little deviation as far as the narrative that is presented in the media, and that kind of troubles me. Who do I think has portrayed trans people positively? I know that, I did some work on I wrote a paper once upon a time on Thomas Beatty, the pregnant trans guy, and he did a lot of interviews through all of that, and I felt like Barbara Walters did the best job with her interviews, because she didn't play into this sort of oh my gosh, this is crazy hype, and she allowed him to speak for himself, which I think is really important. He also did an interview with Oprah, and it really bothered me in that interview because he would say, Oprah would say something, or Thomas would say something, and then Oprah would pan to the audience, the camera would go to the audience, and people would be like, and it just it really set up this I don't know, really not okay sort of hype and crazy freaks thing, and I really was bothered by that. So I think that was pretty negative. As far as other people in the media that portrays trans people, I don't really know a whole lot, other than some documentaries that I watched, which I'll talk a little bit about now. Some good documentaries that I really liked, if people are interested in seeing some of these things, are Red Without Blue is a documentary about twins that were at one point both gay identified brothers, and then one of the twins transitions into female. So that's a really interesting documentary because it talks about the twin aspect of it and their socialization, and their gender and sexuality identities and how those differ. And I really appreciate that. And then there's another documentary, I kind of love documentaries, so there's another one called Cruel and Unusual, and it talks about trans women, mostly trans people in prison and in in the prison system and how fucked up that is, and how not okay that system treats trans people. So that's really interesting. An educational thing that I think more people should be aware of, and more people should be active in trying to change how that system treats trans people. There's another documentary, called Paris is Burning, that is really interesting, because it focuses mostly on lower socioeconomic and people of color. So it's really fantastic, and it's kind of older, and it's set, I think, mostly in New York, and it's about the ball scene in the underground movement going on there. I think in the early 90s, maybe 80s. So it's really interesting because it looks not just at gender and transgender individuals, but sexuality, and most specifically about with how those intersect with class and race. And so that's really, really fantastic, I think. Another documentary that I think is really interesting is called Almost Myself, and I really don't like how the director and or narrator of this documentary talks about these things. That's pretty questionable, but they present the story of a guy, and his name was Joseph, and he transitioned into to be a woman and lived for 20 years as a woman, and then has since transitioned back now to be a man. And so they talk about his journey from cisgendered male to trans woman, and now to some version of a trans man. And so that's a really interesting narrative. I think the way the documentary is framed is kind of problematic, but I really liked that presentation of a different narrative. So that was interesting. And then lastly, this is probably one that I don't like how it shows trans people. There's another documentary called Trantasia, and it's about trans women in the very first all trans women beauty pageant. So that's a really interesting documentary, because it's very very obvious how these trans women are participating and choosing to participate in or being resistant to a very sexist situation, such as the way this beauty pageant is portrayed. So there's a lot of men in there that are just very sexist and misogynist to these trans women. So there's this play with sexism and transgenderism that happens in there that I think is very fascinating, and again, something that not a lot of people in the trans community might talk about, or not a lot of activists might look at those things as directly as I think maybe they should be. So that's really interesting. So there's kind of some documentaries that I think are good that I thought I'd throw out there. What would I like to see addressed in documentaries or in the media? Again, kind of based on what I talked about, I would really like to see more narratives, different narratives, because not all guys or girls, not all trans people fall under this same narrative, this same born in the wrong body, I always hated my gender sort of situation. That's real for some people, and I'm not denying that or devaluing that, but there are a lot of people, and as you can tell by looking through YouTube, there are a lot of people that don't necessarily adhere so strictly to that narrative. So I would like to see a more authentic version of other narratives presented in the media. That being said, I think that the internet has helped, has helped trans people in a lot of ways, because it's allowed trans people to portray themselves. We get to see trans people actually talking about themselves and their own experiences, and they're presenting their own narratives, which I think is fantastic, because so many of these things that we're talking about in the media and documentaries take the agency away from the trans person, and it's other people, cisgendered people, talking about these things, and you don't get to hear the voice of the actual people that they're talking about. So I am all about the internet for its ability to give trans people the agency and let them tell their own stories. I don't know if I answered the questions or digressed from the topic. I might have, but those are my thoughts for this week, so I'll see you guys later.